It's 9 o'clock on Friday, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from TRIDEC, your local economic development association. Today is the ongoing series of our 2021 economic outlook, and it's my pleasure to introduce Ajsa Suljic from the State Department of, gosh, now I'm spacing, I'm sorry, Ajsa, ESD, right?
Employment Security Department.
Employment Security Department, thank you. And I mess up on it because I just know you as our regional economist. That's what really matters to me, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So thanks for joining us. And as always, you're one of our key speakers every year in our economic outlook, and obviously we're doing it virtually this year. So thanks for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
We'll kick off our regular Coffee with Karl with just a brief chat about a mug or anything that you're drinking or a cup. This morning I've got Tri-Cities Airport from Port Pasco. Early on in Coffee with Karl, we said, hey, if anybody wants to send us some mugs, we'll be happy to give a shout out. So I'm giving a shout out this morning to the airport. Obviously, they've been their flights have been fewer than they were in the previous year because of COVID. But we were excited this week when they announced that they do have some new direct flights into San Diego. And so Buck and the staff and the port are doing a great job over there, and we want to support them. So that's my coffee or mug story. Ajsa, do you have anything you want to share with us about what you're drinking or any type of container or anything?
Big mug.
There you go. That's perfect.
I'm very bad hot drink drinker. So for anything, for me, it would be hot tea, but it's not even hot tea because it has to stand for quite a while to cool down for me to consume it. So it's an ongoing joke in my family about, oh, she's drinking hot tea an hour later. So I usually stick with lots of water, but I've been liking the mugs lately as well. Buying them, I'm rarely using them. They have a lot of great messages, a way to even give yourself uplift, not only to promote a good cause or business or organization like Port of Pasco and airport. But I'm liking the innovations in warming cups, warm your hands cups. They've been on for a while, but I never noticed them because it's too hot for me to handle anyway.
Right. Well, and this morning, I think with the snow and the temperature, it's always nice to have something at least a little bit warmer than maybe normal times to keep warmed up.
For sure. If anybody asked me if we're going to have snow during economic outlook, I would have said yes. Almost every second year, we do have snow or cancellations because of weather conditions, and doesn't matter if we move it Tracy and TRIDEC move it a little bit forward or leave it behind, snow happens.
Snow happens whenever that's a good point. I'll have to keep that in mind as we move forward. Well, Ajsa, I know you worked really hard on the slides you want to share with us. Do you want to start sharing your screen? And for our audience, I'll let everyone know that we have our question and answer feature at the bottom, where I'll do my best not to interrupt what you're talking about, but maybe ask some questions as we go through slides if there's any questions from the audience. And then if you're on social media, you can ask your questions in the comment box. And I think, we should have some time left over at the end. So if there are some more questions, we can get into those. But Ajsa, do you want to share your screen and we'll get started? Thanks again for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning with you. Really appreciate it. And yes, a lot of people just know me as regional economist, but the Employment Security Department comes pretty subtle in the background. I had a meeting one time, and this gentleman comes, so you from this department, do you have anything to say? Because that employment security was left behind and the department was left in. And for sure, this time around, during COVID, almost 12 months running, March 15th from closures, our department, our agency has been put right there up front of COVID and in all aspects, serving businesses, serving job seekers and unemployed, as well as our labor market information that has been coming in very handy to give great leading indicators to what's happening in each local community and statewide and nationally. And the only way we were able to see immediate impacts were unemployment statistics coming from those collecting benefits, which industries were laying off, closing, and putting individuals out of the job market because of health risk and safety requirements and so forth. And these numbers for probably good 6 months running were the hottest topic you can even imagine, not only in our state and locally, but nationally. But over the past 11 months, we were able to gather even more data, get more administrative data, not only those statistics on labor force that we had guided or estimates coming from non-farm employment census and statistics. We were able to get some of those statistics from revenues, employment, quarterly reports, and so forth to actually see what happened in each community. So today I'm going to try to share a little bit of the background to where we were in 2019, how good we had it, how good we were standing as local community in regards of economic activity, population growth, and labor force expansion, and what happened during COVID-19, which industries got impacted, how they rebounded, if they rebounded, to what level, and why they're not coming back. And finally, we're going to look into some of the local spending statistics, local population statistics, and how that's guiding some of this stability and diversity in local community beyond what's happening as in other regions around us or in the state, where our consumerism from local population has contributed to that expansion or faster recovery compared to other communities. So if you do have any questions, do ask on every slide, but it might seem that they could be repetitive. However, every slide has its own story, especially because of where we are with our community expansion, economic and population growth.
Thank you.
All right. Let's start. So 2019 review, this is where we were. In 2019, over 126,000 jobs were covered under unemployment insurance, and that covers over 96% of all businesses located locally, state, or nationally, and excludes few of them, self-employed, commissioned, and some federal agencies who have their own unemployment coverages and so forth. But the 96 coverage brings in good point to where we have a good sense of how many jobs we have within local communities. So for Benton Franklin counties combined, 126,000 covered jobs is very significant. And we recorded 1.8% growth in 2019 over the year. And year before that, we had a significant growth. And year before that, we were expanding from July 2013 all the way to April 2020 in or around 2 to 2.5% growth rate. So this expansion of 1.8% was just in that region. And the only reason we saw below 2% is the slowdown of economic activities in fourth quarter 2019 due to concerns of COVID-19 internationally and what was happening with trade and expansions. But we started feeling that back in fourth quarter, and our payrolls actually didn't slow down. There was more activity in businesses to give raises, increase their paychecks of their employees, as well as add number of people to their payrolls. And over $6.8 billion came out of these total covered jobs, with increase of 5.7% over the year. That was very significant. Usually we were in the range of 2.4, 3.4% growth in payrolls. And this expansion in 2019 just signaled business confidence to start expanding towards the labor force spending and wages for retention purposes. We started getting a lot of competitiveness for labor force, as the markets for labor force were reaching one of the lowest unemployment rates in 2019. We were below 4.6% in July of 2019, and that ran for almost a year from 2018, August, in that range. That means that was very, very tight labor force market and competition for right skills, right knowledge, and abilities from those individuals getting hired. And that's certainly reflected in those total covered payrolls rightfully in 2019. And at the same time, we had total of 8,545 covered companies located in Benton Franklin communities. These are not companies, in Yakima or Adams or Walla Walla County or Oregon. These are located physically here and paying their employees from local physical address. The increase in businesses was a 4.3%, or close to 300 new businesses within a year that we added to local community. And all these 300, even if they hired one person, that's additional 300 new jobs that we contributed. But hiring was between 2 to 4 people for each business, which signaled very confident, entrepreneurial, and good opportunity and investment from outside companies to come in and open their doors here or expand their operations in different cities throughout these 2 counties. On the other side, we have civilian labor force. Civilian labor force ending in 2019 was over 146,283. Continuous growth. The only time we saw decreases in labor force was during 2011, Hanford layoffs. And since then, we've been increasing, I would say significantly compared to other communities, but 4.0% growth was very beneficial. And this is one of those leading indicators signaling that local population age 16 and older was gaining more confidence in living here and finding and maintaining jobs to sustain their livelihood, families, and of course the discretionary spending on new iPhones, iPads, or new cars. Tesla was coming roaring in 2018, 2019, more so than it was introduced years before, and it was becoming very popular. And people were spending on things that they usually wouldn't, but that only came from their confidence and their entrance into the labor force and ability to find the jobs and retain the jobs and earn those quality incomes. Usually, we talk about unemployment rate, but employment rate for the civilian labor force was over 94.4%. And employment increased almost at the same rate as total civilian labor force, 4.1%. People came in and they found jobs. They came into the labor force. If you're 15 turning 16, you're coming into labor force, for example, you were able to find a job. If you were out of the market for 5-10 years due to different reasons, you're coming into labor force, you usually are finding jobs. The only revolving unemployment statistics, we had over 8,141 people in unemployment in 2019 basically were individuals going from seasonal unemployment or temporary employment into different employments. Their length of unemployment was less than 27 weeks. Okay. So they were able to secure those jobs much faster and get into the labor market much faster. And unemployment rate actually did increase over the year by 2.7% as we saw more increases in those seasonal industries for the labor force. In addition to our business, number of businesses and stability that we have locally, a number of people living here and working here or elsewhere, we have non-employer companies. As of 2018, we had over 12,500 people reporting self-employment without any employees. That's a very significant number when we mention that we have over 146,000 people actually engaged in the labor force. Those are, either employed or unemployed for past 4 weeks or looking for employment. And then you had all these companies, over 12,500 who were self-employed and making money through many different industries in local community. They brought in over $573.4 million in revenue from these businesses. Wow. Whether those sales or service sales, any type of industry, basically we had self-employment or non-employer companies in almost all 20 of different industries in local community. I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper into these numbers. So we did know, I just mentioned, over 8,500 companies, over 126,000 employees, $6.8 billion in payrolls. Well, what are these industries? What are these businesses? What's giving us diversification? In 2019, as you can see, that for both counties combined as a region, government had 14.8% of total employment. In this government, we have to account for local education, state education, and public assisted healthcare services. So that when we take those two in account, that represents majority of total government employment in local community. And 14.8% is not equal in both counties. It's not saying that government employment is dominant in Benton County as it is in Franklin County. And we'll see that on the next slide. But these leading indicators show that even though government is very dominant here, it is dominant for good reasons. It's dominant for health benefits as well as education of our youth. The second largest industry in our community was healthcare and social assistance. And this is private healthcare social assistance. And we have seen developments in our healthcare structure. We have seen growth in the healthcare industry. We have seen diversification of healthcare industry. It's not only basic healthcare that we have gained over the past 10 years, we have gained more customizable or desirable healthcare services for a community where our community used to go out for other regions or all the way to the west side to get some of these healthcare services. Well, now our local healthcare businesses, healthcare organizations, we're striving to provide better access to healthcare to all levels of population, income levels, as well as age levels, so that you have healthcare for youth, you have good pediatricians, you have good healthcare for elderly, you have good healthcare services for all of us in between who are seeking to get healthier and better by day. Third highest industry for the region was retail trade. Retail trade employed over 13,000 people, and it's in that cluster of industries that goes along together in transportation, warehousing, and wholesale trade and utilities as part of that cluster. And it's all related. You can't have transportation, if you don't have anything to transport, and then you have manufacturing, agriculture playing big role to that. So it's all related, and our retail trade rallied big time on that infrastructure and ability for companies to open these stores locally and hire and have their products delivered safely and on time for consumers to utilize. And we were placed in a position where retail trade was part of that population growth, and you'll see population growth demanding different types of retail sales, not just JCPenney, for example, but they wanted something different, something new, a new hip that's trending elsewhere, and we were bringing it down to local level and expanding it from one city to the next and to the next. And almost both counties have equally tried to supply that demand with that retail store shopping and different style. And we have a good mix of retail shopping, and most of our retail shopping you'll see is not necessarily those large clothing stores, but it's a combination of those supermarkets, and that's a key to our survival and growth in retail trade industry. You'll see in 2020 review COVID-19 impacts. Agriculture, it's a big deal for us. We may think that it's out there in the background, what's happening with agricultural farm workers, the laws, and things like that. Who's picking those apples, cherries, peaches, onions, carrots, potatoes? Who are these people? And these individuals, not only that they have started settling here back in 2005, 2006, are contributing great labor force, but then employers are even hiring more so than nationally. Nationally, agricultural employment has been going down since 1957. Wow. You know, the heights. Innovations in technology, innovations in everything is being bringing down agriculture. We were kind of opposite of all of that. We are in the center of agricultural activities, along with Yakima, Conaga, and Douglas, Grant, Adams counties, including Walla Walla down here. We are in the center of those agricultural activities, and it shows in regards to agricultural employment. When we combine both of our counties together, 10% of total employment, 10% of the 126,000 jobs was in agriculture. It's diversification. It's different. So you have government needed by healthcare. You have healthcare needed by population and everybody living here. You have retail trade demanded by population growth and expansion of businesses. You have agriculture that's not only demanded locally, it's in demand. Nationally, internationally, we export these products, and for heaven's sakes, we could not consume all those products, but they not only bring these great jobs, they bring all other different types of revenue to local communities and taxable sales. So that's 4 top industries, and the 5th one will be combining together would be administrative waste services, professional technical services, and these 2 industries combined together do make up the largest portion of Hanford and not necessarily Hanford, but federal funded associated jobs, so including Hanford and labs and everything that's federally funded in that cluster, and that's over 75% of employment when we combine in these 2 industries, and that's the 5th largest community and industry. And taking that in account, that's federally funded, so we know that we have different incomes coming in, and money coming in, and wages coming in from different sources, from agriculture, from federally funded businesses and jobs that need to be done in our local community, government, healthcare, retail trade, and so forth. Very good diversity, and that's almost equally over 10%. I'm going to round it 10% and higher share for these top 5 industries. And not many communities are diverse as this. So let's take a look at each county separately. I won't go into too much detail, but I'm going to highlight a few things. This is sorted on the right-hand side by Benton County, percent of total employment share by industry. And we can see private healthcare and social assistance is #1 employing industry for Benton County. And while for Franklin County, that 19% share of total employment falls under public government, public education, healthcare services, and government employment. And the second largest for Benton County was government, while second largest for Franklin County is agriculture. And you can see how these two counties balance each other in different ways that is not take away, but it contributes to the diversity of the regional economic stability. So non-employers, who are these industries the non-employers or self-employed are going into? And as I mentioned, we have over 12,500 of these companies. The largest employing or our largest number of concentrated self-employers or non-employers, either way, self-employers or non-employers, is in other services except public administration. That could be plumbers, tax accountants, things like that, at 15.2%. We have professional scientific technical services, 14.4%, real estate, as we know, 12%, and we have retail trade at 13.6%. We find non-employers in almost every industry, but these are, when you look at these industries that I just mentioned, those are some of the industries that we have to have self-employers on their own to provide services, as it's not feasible for company to have, we would have 2 companies hiring all the plumbers. What about plumbers that can work for themselves and get those incomes? And they do a great job, for example. Or in retail trade, there's many companies that it's a storefront, but they're the only person working there because that's their livelihood, they're making money, and so forth. But when you look at their revenue, where these non-employers are making the money or bringing in the revenue the most, real estate, rental, and leasing, mostly real estate, brings in most revenue at 25.8% of the total $573.4 million. Okay. That's the largest, it looks like, best way to go into self-employment, to go into real estate, rental, and leasing, right, if you're looking at that. You agree?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because, I think in residential real estate specifically, and I think it's been going down, like just the available supply is going down. And there's just, even within the year that I've been here, there's a steady increase even in building permits for single family. And so it's, real estate, that's awesome that the sole proprietors brought in the most revenue, but I just wonder, has that changed over, like in the next year, because there's just not anything to sell or not much to sell. So just a comment, really, more than a question.
Right. Yeah. So this is very interesting. So these are not the numbers we're not going to see if we go back a slide. When you look at real estate right here, real estate, rental, leasing, very small percentage, the share of total employment at 1.0%, 1.2 for each county. And then you go over here where real estate represents 12% of 12,500 non-employer companies. Yeah. Well, taking that in account, about 10 years ago, we have rental and leasing. We have many companies locally doing different style, not only housing for lease or rental, but there's other types. The real estate side of it, the increase in self-employed, they're not actually self-employed, but they're commission-based. realtors.
Right.
I believe 10 years ago, we were close to about 400 or 500, around that range. Right now, as I'm hearing, we are well over 1,100 realtors in a local community.
Okay.
And that number is being steadily going up. That means there is business, there is activity in real estate for local communities, even though the numbers of those houses or commercial properties and things like that is not as large. But for all those active realtors, there's opportunity to make good incomes and earn good money. And commissions are really good. When you look at the price ranges, just in single family housing price ranges, if you are selling a home of right now, average is probably over $360,000. That, you know, if that's over, and you're making 3 to 6% commission on that, it's not bad way to go out and be self-made.
That's a good point. So
in 2019, very quickly, I just want to give you a heads up on this one because it's all related. Our population growth, our economic growth, and number of jobs growth is all related, and one drives the other one. We can say population drives all the jobs. We can say that all the jobs are driving population growth. It's a combination of both that's integrating local community to move forward and expand. And in 2019, we have over 200, this was estimated by US Census. When we look at OFM numbers, Office of Financial Management, Washington State Office of Financial Management numbers, it's a little bit different, but nonetheless, we are in that range of over 299,000 people living in these two counties. Each county differs in growth, but out of these 299,000 people in 2019, 146,000 people were in the labor force, 94% employment rate for them, and 5.6% unemployment rate. But when you look at just specifically Benton County and Franklin County, participation rate for labor force in Franklin County is 66%. It's the third highest county in the state after King and Snohomish County. Wow. King reached over 70% participation rate, and Snohomish is about 67%, and Franklin County comes at 66%. Benton County is slightly a little bit lower at 62.2%, but when we combine together, we are one of the leading Eastern Washington and state of Washington communities with largest labor force engagement and participation. 81.3% of these individuals are between 25 to 64 years of age. So if you're looking for youth or elderly workforce, you may not be in as much in luck, but 81.3% of all people in labor force are in that prime working age. 31.1% of all labor force is Hispanic and Latina. And that's something to say for diversity and quality of workforce and skills and knowledge abilities. We have a local community that brings into an addition to all permanent white alone population, as well as all other races and ethnicity. 44.5% labor force is female. And each county differs in female labor force engagement. Something that we have noticed is that a female workforce in Franklin County engages into the workforce much earlier. So as soon as 16 years and older, but then they do exit the labor force for that prime family time period, and they re-engage later on. But Benton County labor force is not, female labor force does not engage into the labor market as early as Benton County. They tend to move towards higher education, or because of their family's ability to move them to that level. So each of these counties' population entrance into labor force depends on the family structure and income levels and their ability to spend on things like education and ability to send their kids outside. And one of the benefits for all local community is expansion in education, especially higher education offerings for our community to keep going into those some college or higher achievement degrees.
Okay.
And then when we look at labor force industries, where they're most likely to find their skills, knowledge, abilities, and it comes down to educational healthcare services as 20.5% of total labor force share in this segment. Also, we have professional, scientific, technical management and waste management services industry, 13.1%. And that's where the core of our labor force that's living here is educated towards to, has the skills, knowledge, experience to do work in. And it's very well balanced graph. We have labor force in almost all different types of industries, but the service industries in education, healthcare, professional scientific management, those industries do require higher education levels, bachelor's degree or higher. Majority of them to even be hired. It's not supportive services, but primary jobs are with bachelor's degree and higher, and they tend to pay higher wage, especially average annual wage. Occupational segment, and as I mentioned, it's really related back down to industries. Management, business, science, and arts occupations dominate our local labor force. Where they are engaged, where they gain their knowledge through education or experience, that's where the primary workforce is engaged in: management, business, science, arts, and occupations. So, with all of this information, we were at the highest peak. We were expanding rapidly. We were adding people into a local community, but into the labor force. We were expanding business and so forth. And then 2020 happened. I was presenting in January, very optimistic, really good numbers when you look at everything that has happened, what's coming. We had a lot of cautions, who would have expected the pandemic could close an economy?
Yeah.
Right? It never happened before.
Yeah, exactly.
And it did happen. Yeah. It happened, and it happened in our lifetime. And it happened so fast, and it's all for our safety and health and protection of our societies. And you know what? It didn't only happen to us. It happened to almost whole world. And everybody was in the same boat. If this happened only to us, we would have seen different numbers, like population exodus, losses of jobs, dire situation. But it happened everywhere, so people didn't necessarily have opportunity to go somewhere else and change their status. And going somewhere else, you mentioned Port of Pasco, you couldn't fly out.
Right.
Even if you wanted to, it was limited. You stay home, stay healthy, unless it's necessary, extremely necessary to travel, don't go anywhere. So as of December, we stand at 6.4% unemployment rate in Bentic County, 7.4% in Franklin County. As you can see, around the state, almost every community in December has increased unemployment rates. Assotin County still is faring well and has the lowest unemployment rate at 4.6%, followed by Whitman and Lincoln County, just in between 5 and 6% unemployment rates. But each one of these counties has been impacted by COVID and in a different way. And for us, this is what happened to us. 13.5% unemployment rate in April, 12.2% unemployment rate in May, going down to 10% in June. And then look at this. As of December 2020, our unemployment rate stands, not seasonally adjusted, at 6.7%. 2019 unemployment rate in December, 6.6%. So did we go up too much? Not necessarily.
Right.
We were back almost to the same unemployment rates and unemployment statistics as we were in 2019 December.
Yeah.
And seasonally adjusted 5.8% unemployment rate. When you look at state of Washington, United States, we are faring much better in regards to unemployment, which is a leading indicator of what's happening or what's going to happen down the road, than the state and the nation.
Yeah.
State at 7.1% seasonally and 7.2% not seasonally adjusted, and nation at 6.7% and 6.5% not seasonally. So graphs looks kind of deceiving, really. Is like saying that we have the same trend, but those numbers, the not seasonally adjusted numbers or seasonally adjusted numbers, tell better story for our community. Yeah. And as you can see, for every recession, we do follow unemployment trend that's happening statewide and nationally. We do see larger number of people in unemployment, collecting benefits or not collecting benefits, looking for jobs, depends if they qualify or not. But this time around, the expansion of unemployment benefits and CARES Act contribution to the support of those individuals who lost jobs increased individuals' ability to come into the labor force and start collecting benefits. Even those who were doing part-time or 680 hours less, they got into the system, and we are able to be supported through all different methods that federal and state agencies were putting forward to sustain and alleviate some of these impacts from COVID-19. On this slide, this is what happened to resident labor force. And you can see that we had a similar trend as the nation in regards of the losses during pandemic, just basically April and May, but we started recovering in regards of labor force so much faster. By December 2020, we ended up at 153,000 people in labor force. We were 3.9% more than in November, and we are 4.7% more people in labor force than in 2019. Wow. And as I recall, we grew about 4.0% in December in 2019 in labor force. We added additional 4.7% in labor force in 2020. Wow. Extraordinary growth for this, and it just rallies back to the confidence and influx of support for these unemployed individuals who enter this. Statewide and nationally, you can see that didn't happen. Nationally, labor force recovery is not there. It's just bottomed out and leveled off right now, and there's no significant growth. There was some growth statewide, but the past 3 to 4 months, labor force growth statewide is being very dismal and if not decreasing. Over the year, state of Washington decreased by 2.4% in the labor force. Okay. So we basically, in summary, went from, this way, we went in labor force, we went from being okay with growth to even expanding more while we were supposed to be contracting labor force due to COVID related issues and individuals. Everybody anticipated individuals to fall out because of their lack of confidence in the market, while we did the opposite. Wow.
And I know you probably have some more slides coming up, but so did we grow our labor force through participation or through in-migration? Can you tell, or is it too early?
Participation was main driver for 2020 growth. And also when we look at our general population growth that contributes to our labor force growth, it's equally the same. We have the individuals that are coming into the local community for jobs, but as well we have those newcomers into the labor market who are exiting. And we're going to see that in maybe population slides, that our population expansion and population demographics, especially in age, are contributing a great deal to those new entrants in the labor force. And also, when we look at the stability of industries, the early retirees exiting labor force because they can afford it this time around. It wasn't financial impact, but because, you know, they want to stay home. They want to stay and spend some time with their families, and there's more exiters of this pre-retirement age than we had seen during 2010 recession. So it's a combination of both, but primarily right now, it's the influx of the labor force that's living here that's contributing to the growth. Industries that got impacted the most, I won't go over the slide, but the industries that got impacted the most through the labor force initial claims coming through our department were construction, healthcare and social assistance, accommodation, food services, retail trade, and manufacturing. Okay. And you can see the basically top two industries here in local community, healthcare and retail trade, in those most impacted or most claimed industries by those individuals that came through. We had over 20,000 people in April come into the unemployment system, 18,000 a month after that. We are ending week 5 or 2021, and total number of unique claimants coming through the system was over 70,000 people.
Wow.
That means almost 50% of the labor force that we had in 2019, around 50%, came through the unemployment system.
Had some contact for some period of time. They claimed benefits. Yeah.
Yes, from week 9 of 2020 through week 5, 2021. It's very significant. But now, you know, that number is a little bit less because we increased in labor force.
Sure. But still, I think it shows in your last slide that the severity of the slope, right? That so when you looked at total labor force participation and then it grew back, it shows that, like you say, almost 50% of the labor force actually used unemployment benefits to some degree, but then it just came rolling back even faster and stronger.
This time around, people were willing to get into the unemployment and get engaged through that system and get the support while they can go look for jobs and ensure to be able to get the jobs. These are some occupational groups that got impacted the most. Management, especially mid-level management, was impacted the most in local community. And we have construction jobs, and that was very early on, but then we have seasonal factors that play a role in this industry as well. And we'll see in regards of the employment growth. And then food preparation, serving occupations related to food services and leisure hospitality industry, office administrative support services, a lot of offices that closed and telecommute, they don't need a lot of these as the administrative support staff that they were laid off. And sales related occupations, almost every one of these occupations is in-person occupational group that you can provide over the computer, but innovations in AI technology has certainly been changing how we do our business and how we deliver services to our local communities. So looking through the jobs, gonna try to speed up a little bit. I'd rather have some more discussion from questions, but overall, we ended the year in 2020 with only 2.5% loss over the year, about 3,000 jobs. And over the month, due to additional closure in November, we lost additional 800 jobs. And that brought down our recovery rate from 91% down to 81%. Recovery of the jobs lost in April. But when we look at the statewide nationally, we are faring pretty good in regards of over the year losses and our stability in local jobs and different industry growth. And, you know, we never had a similar recession as we did in regards of non-farm jobs as we did right now. Yeah. Before we stumbled through recession, we only saw it through unemployed and statistics, but then we followed that recession about 2 to 3 years after the fact with layoffs from different industries. But this time around, everybody was in the same boat, but the recovery of jobs and addition of new jobs in local community really contributed to coming out of that COVID-19 impact much faster than state ordination.
And like you said, it was, this was the first time that we had a pandemic, and because we had to close all the industries down, that's probably what forced the fact that we're following the same trend line as the state and the country. Yeah,
for sure. But the key for us, in a sense, is the base industries that are keeping us stable and able to grow and expand while we recover from those industries that got impacted the most. As I mentioned, during the month of April, we lost 10,400 jobs. Those are administrative numbers. Those are actual numbers. That's 8.8% of all jobs that we had in 8% in March. So we went from 117 to 107,000 jobs in April. Largest contributor to this losses was leisure and hospitality, private education and healthcare services, retail, trade, and construction. And here on this graph, you can see what happened during April, which industries got impacted. These marks just mean that these industries fall into that industry that I marked into. So food services roll up into leisure and hospitality industry. So you can look at that separately, but it gives you breakouts so you can actually see that food services contributed largely to leisure and hospitality loss. Same goes for the other industries as well. And you can see where the recovery is. Where are those jobs from May through December? Where we gained the most jobs. And we regained, on the next slide, we gained back 8,500 jobs. We were over 9,000 jobs in October, but due to closures back in November, we went back down because we lost about most of the jobs in food services again. 81.7% recovery rate of those lost jobs from April. Overall, 115,000 non-farm jobs, and we're not counting anything that happens in agriculture. And of course, every industry is different in recovery. Leisure hospitality is still about 26.2%. They lost about 1,000 jobs. They were about 59% recovery rate, but most of all industries statewide associated to leisure hospitality is still down because of the closures and mandates to be followed. Private education and healthcare services regained all the jobs and added 200 more jobs in addition to that. But retail trade, consumer driven, and the structure of retail trade and local community, not only that lost 1,500 jobs, they added, gained those 1,500 jobs back and added 1,100 more jobs to the payrolls, to local community, and expanded different types of services in retail trade. We went from 13,000 to 14,500 people employed in retail trade, and gaining more. Construction is in full recovery, 100% of job, but the only industry that's down and losing is still that government associated to government education services that are not fully open yet.
Gotcha.
This is statewide. We are the best recovered community among 12 metropolitan statistical areas statewide. 81.7% for Kennewick metropolitan statistical area. Statewide average is 58.6%. The closest to us in recovery was Longview, 79.4%.
Okay.
All right, so 5 minutes. Let's roll it out.
Yeah.
Any questions so far?
Yeah, we do have one. If I could throw a question in there, and then yeah, we just have about 5 minutes. But it was a question about do we have any data on the number of companies that have actually closed? Like we're looking at employment, but is company closure, Ajsa, any is there any data out there that we can share, or bankruptcies, or is that something that's harder to track?
Actually, so for every business, they don't have to report their closure.
Okay.
For example, if they're smaller, but if they employ, I think 100, might be 50 to 100 people or more, they have to do warn notices to the state. Many of them do follow the law and do that. As we've seen with the fires in the manufacturing plant in Grand County, they put out the warn notice of permanent layoffs for 62 people. So we get those through and we see them very often. And I've been monitoring our warn notices in Southeastern Washington, and we barely have any at all. A few that came through was through transition, MSA transition of contracts that came through for layoffs. Other than that, nothing significant. The only tracking that right now we will be following, and we are following, are these firm numbers that I reported. So we're going to wait for conclusion of 2020 administrative data and see which industries and how many businesses we have lost during COVID-19 impacts. And these are lagging numbers that don't get reported to probably July 2021, where we're going to see 2020 numbers in that regard. Right now, we can only look at second quarter, but many businesses didn't close right away.
Sure. Well, and as you showed that, like 8 or 9% of our labor force is in sole proprietorships or non-employers, and so if you're a one-person shop and you close and you have to report, then it's probably really hard to track.
Yes.
With the diversity of the size of the businesses.
And those numbers, as you saw, we have 2018 numbers. We want to see 2020 numbers to 2022 in self-proprietors income, because it's coming through IRS taxes. Okay. But we'll see them eventually, and we'll see that lagging indicator after the fact. But so far, anything that I'm hearing, we have small closures, but nothing significant like what's happening in the I-5 corridor area, and with those closures, and it's very concerning.
Yeah. Actually, we're down to just 2 minutes now. I wonder if we could, I know you have a summary slide at the end, and I apologize because you have such great data. And I'm kind of a data geek myself, so I always appreciate your explanation and kind of given the story behind it, but there's so much, and I just encourage everybody that we did put the slides available in the chat if you'd like to download them, and we'll put them on our website, I think, too, if anybody wants to take a look. But yeah, could you just summarize, and thanks again for putting all this together. I know it was a lot of work for you, but it's really a great summary, and it's always good information for our outlook.
Yeah, I always put even extra data here, and if you listen carefully to my presentation, I have talked about each one of these slides already, because they are so related and in primary into the labor force and our non-firm and total employment numbers, and we can't take that out. And I mentioned wages and income, I mentioned population growth, I mentioned housing and consumer confidence. This graph is not even mine, but I loved it. I just wanted to share with you. Just the shift in spending, how that's interesting, How many offices do we have now? How many of us have computer desks? Things like that. It's so interesting to follow and look. And finally, as you said, in this outlook, we wouldn't be here talking about benefits of diversity, benefits of population growth and everything, if there was no support. This monetary and fiscal support that came roaring in during these closures has never been seen in such a level before. And it benefited almost everybody. It contributed to that consumer confidence to spend and find jobs, contributed to unemployment for personal stimulus checks and things like that. And when we look at those incomes 75 and less, this monetary and fiscal supports, even for businesses, have supported some confidence, even though we have so much concern to what's going to happen. But for now, we are just riding the wave up top. We're not rolling under. So this consumerism and workforce confidence will be one of those leading indicators that will tell us how we're going to do in 2021. And so far, communities in our local communities are not slowing down in spending in retail trade or real estate or anywhere, and they're only spending because they have confidence in the workforce. They have confidence in local community to provide sustainable and living jobs for them and move forward. I'm predicting that some of those leading industries will be healthcare, professional technical business services, food manufacturing, construction, retail trade, because they're all interrelated towards that population growth as well as labor force growth and their confidence for local communities. And in this, as part of this population growth that we are gaining because of our stability is coming in from migration. 50% growth in population from natural increases and migration is rarely seen anywhere. It's either one side or the other that outweighs the population growth. We are benefiting a great deal from both, and we are looking forward that our local communities, along with your agency, Karl, will be guiding and embracing this change and making it even better in coming years. If we continue this way, in 10 years, we will be close to 400,000 people in local community. The growth is significant, but at the same time, our jobs and expansion in entrepreneurship will be expanding as well.
That's great. And that's a really great summary, Ajsa. And I'll just say that, as we work daily to talk to companies that are looking to move into our region for many of the strengths that you just showed, workforce is always such a critical factor. And so to have this data to even share with them, to show them our trend lines and how we are growing the labor force participation from population, and then, the percentage of the labor force is actually participating, that's great information. And I think it's to your point, it's a leading indicator of our economy and how optimistic and well things are going. And that just helps us sell the community even better. So this is really, really great information. And we've gone just a few minutes over, but again, you always have such great information. We could probably go, a couple hours into it and then another hour for questions. But Ajsa, thanks for your time this morning, putting this information together and sharing it with us. And as always, you're just such a great, participant in our economic outlook. So thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, Karl. And thank you, everybody. I geeked out because I had a whole hour and I still couldn't do it all.
Well, we'll make sure in the future, even as we go back to live events, we'll make sure that we give you some more time, because this is really a great information. So thanks again, Ajsa, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.